Hello. So in this lesson, we're going to cover how to draw faces in small panels, or when the person's way in the background. You'll note here that he's more in the foreground, and although this is a pretty big panel, she's way far in the background, and so she has no face at all. And sometimes that's the best option, is just to give them no face. Sometimes you might, just add a little bit of shadow. I'm going to show you guys how to accomplish this. Other times, it's okay to add just a little bit of detail to the face, and we can see this is done in other comic books as well. So here's one quick example. We have here the faces. We can see them all, but her face here has very little detail. Their face is no detail at all. They're so far in the background, it's better just to have the shape of the head and the hair, and that's it. And that's enough to describe the figure. Notice the whole entire figure is really reduced in detail. Here, when we have them get less and less detail, the smaller the face gets. Notice here it's just a couple little lines, and then here literally just a couple black dots and a line for the mouth, and that's it. And here's one more example, I believe from I think Aspen or Fathom. Notice here when the faces are nice and close up, you have a lot of detail you can add to the faces. And so whenever you want to get intimate and really show the emotions of the characters, really show the details of the face, you put the face closer to the camera, basically, right? But here you can see there's a lot less detail. It's literally just a couple lines for the nose, like literally looks like just like a line for the nose. Here you can see a lot of lines making up the nose, a lot of detail. Here the mouth is a very basic shape, no lips. Here you can see it's just a little line for the nose, a couple of lines for the eyes and the mouth. Now, a mistake that people make when they're trying to draw small faces is to try to still draw all the detail in there and then shrink it down. And it doesn't work. If you take a face that has a lot of detail and you shrink it down, it loses a lot of what it had. Like it's no longer really readable. So an example of that would be, let's say we take his face here. We're like, hey, we're just going to draw it this size, and we're going to shrink it way down. What happens is it really becomes practically unreadable, right? It's really hard to see. You kind of see it's angry, but it's kind of auto-reduced. It's kind of auto-reduced it into see a few lines. But we can actually do that ourselves manually and do a better job at it. Let's go ahead and do that now. By the way, this comic here is End of All. It's free. It's a free graphic novel to read on my website. Just go to masterpaintingnow.com or endofallcomic.com. Another thing to consider is how is it going to look in print. I highly recommend before you ever print anything out to do a quick sketch of a page and draw different details in different areas, draw some small faces, some bigger faces, some with no detail at all, some with a little bit of detail, and do that and then print it out and see what it looks like at the proper size. Right, so let's say we have this panel here. It's just some random panel, and we have a person that's, the face is semi-big, so it's like somewhere around here. Now we can add, sometimes I like to do the whole oval thing and just draw a line through it. Other times I'll actually follow through, and I might as well follow through the way that I'm teaching how to do this. Over time, you'll come up with your own method of doing it. I find sometimes I'll use this method a lot, actually. We'll do it front view since that's what we've been practicing, and we'll just kind of divide this line. This way we get the proper size of where, kind of, if we were to draw details, where everything would be. All right, so let's say that right there is the basic shape we have to work with. We're going to give her just some basic hair here. Okay. One more line coming off there. Right now, if I'm at normal size here, you can see that I can read that. It's pretty readable, actually. And so I know that I can add a decent amount of detail to this because of what I can read just on these basic shapes here. So what I might do is just add, just very, very basic shapes. Let's add just the, maybe the shape of this eye right here like that, a little bit of shape of the under part, make all this part right here dark. It really depends on how much makeup your character wears and how much of detail you want to show, but typically you reduce eyes to detail about like this here and go to black. Sorry about that. And I don't know, maybe your eyebrows are doing something like this here. I reduce them to just basic lines. You don't want to add too much detail, like I said. right? Make sure you get obviously the shape of the face is really important, so you want to make sure you nail that down. Now the nose often is just reduced to a line like this, and it really depends on the character itself. So does the character have more of a kind of more pointed nose? You might just reduce it to something like this. You might also just reduce it to a slight shape like that. You might have more of a point shape. It really depends on the character, on what kind of nose you're going to choose. You might just do two little dots. In this case, for this character, we're going to give her a slightly pointed nose, but not too pointed. And that's a little something like this here. It's a little bit of detail. Now lips, they can be, if they're making some kind of face like they're yelling or something like that, you really want to maybe reduce the amount of, the amount of detail that you have in the face. Now let's go ahead and click this area here and see it. Now see how that mouth is kind of hard to read, and you can kind of tell what it's doing. So I might have to fill in all this with black and give it a better feel. Now you kind of tell, hey, so it's kind of like a yelling face. And then for eyes, obviously it's just going to be pupil or just a black, like a round dot. And that's it for the eyes. That's usually all I do. And then once in a while, if it'll read, maybe at this size, you can add a little bit of a dot there. Let's go back just like this. Right, now what if the face is even smaller than that, right? What if the face is way in the background? Let's say the next face is something around this size here. But we don't really want to, completely get rid of detail. We want to add a little bit of detail. We want it to be sort of readable. You can see that the size of this brush is already too big for it. Now I can tell already that even though the face isn't too much smaller, there's a lot less detail I can work with. Now let's say, what if it was even smaller, right? Let's say this face was, we want to be able to add detail to it, but we want it to be very little detail. Something like that there. Now I have very little detail to work with. So now what I'm going to do, I'm going to use a much smaller brush here. And all I'm going to do is I'm just going to try to capture the shape of the eye. I'm not going to add any bottom line at all. Now this right here works very well when you want to add detail to the face, but you don't want to really go ahead and just draw this in. Anyway, but you don't want to add too much detail. If you add too much detail, it's going to ruin it, and it's going to be really hard to read what it is that you're trying to get across. Maybe just a little line for the nose. I mean, literally just a little line, and then just a little line for the mouth. Now, what if they're making a face? Well, then the same thing. If they're making a face, just add the shape of the mouth. That's it. Don't do anything else. And as you can see from a distance, we'll go into normal size here in just a second. Now it's readable, right? And sometimes you don't even add the pupils at all. It really depends, but when it's that small, there's not a whole lot to work with. You don't want to add too much detail. I might be able to get away with this. In other words, you need a lot of white line in between the lines in order for it to be readable. Just like that, probably be just enough detail or something like that there. Now, suppose she's not yelling or anything like that. She has just a standard face. Don't try to draw her lips when they're this far away. It's just not going to show up. So instead, what you want to do is just kind of draw the straightness of the mouth here. Maybe kind of hint if she's smiling or not. Maybe draw a little bit of the bottom lip, and that's it. And that's all you're going to want to draw for a face that's that small. And even that might be still a little bit too much detail. Now, when the face is really, really small and really far away, the technique, of course, is just to draw the head itself. So all you need the head and hair, and that's how you can be able to tell the character. And so let's say you have the head, and it's really, really, really tiny. It's really far away. And we're going through the basic, should be on size 3 here. Going through the basic ideas here of how to draw everything in. Make sure we get the proper, proper shape to the head here. I'm just going to kind of draw the same type of pretty much face here. Keeping the hair the same. right? So that's, you can tell, I can probably add some detail in there and it'll be readable at that size, but it would have to be very, very little detail. Sometimes though, it's better to just stick with the face itself. So let's go ahead and go to this layer. Sometimes it's better to just add the hair. The hair and the clothing and stuff will probably be enough to be able to tell who the character is. And now, any little tiny details we can add to the face isn't going to be enough to really distinguish the character anyway. And sometimes at this stage, you might add a little line and maybe just tiny lines for where the eyes will be, like solid black lines. You could do something like that here. As you look around, you can kind of tell, hey, okay, that's that character. Now, another thing you can do, actually, let's go back here. I'll just undo the eyes and the nose. It just have the blank face. And sometimes what you can do is draw a couple lines right in here, as if the face is being shadowed. And there you have it. So those are some of the different options you have, but keep in mind you want to stay very, very basic if you do draw facial expressions at all. So if I draw any facial expressions or anything on this character, it's just going to be very basic black. This the outline of what it is I'm trying to draw. I'll probably just do a little line for the nose at this point, and if I have anything for the mouth, it'll be just two little lines like that. Go back to actual size, you can see that looks fine, and you can kind of tell, hey, that's still the same character based on the hair and things like that. So that's what I recommend doing when you're drawing faces for smaller panels. So sometimes it's best to leave the face alone. Just if anything, maybe just add the eyes, and that's it. Sometimes like no mouth at all. If you do add a mouth, just be very careful that you can read it at the small level. And keep in mind, is this for print? Then make sure you print it out and see what it looks like. If it's for online viewing, make sure that online viewing at the size that people can view it at, it's going to be readable and you'll be able to tell what's going on. And like I said, most of the time, it's never a good idea to draw the face like in some detail like this and then shrink it down. For example, if we take this face here and then we shrink it down here to the size of the other face, and even if it does a good job of shrinking down, you can see that it's kind of visible, and that's one thing you could do. It's a valid technique, and then you can reduce it like this, make a new layer. Now you're having to draw it twice though, but this gives you an idea of, hey, you know what? This is probably what I can get away with. Maybe I can just make all this dark, or maybe just leave a little bit of space inside of there. But if you do, it's very little, and then kind of reduce that. And I kind of just want to show the mouth like the person's yelling. And you can see here, right, let me go back to actual pixels, sorry. And then we have a face that's pretty much readable. And then maybe I can come in here and then add a little bit of white into this part of the eye here. So you can kind of see like, hey, the person actually has expression in their eye there. That right there is a technique you could use, and you can try it and see if it works. And if it's just not working, especially for the angle of the face and things like that, for front views, sometimes it's pretty easy to get away with. But if you're trying to do it for certain angles, it just might not look right. But you might get an idea from it. That is, when you reduce it, you can kind of see how the pixels look and stuff. Go, hey, you know what? That's kind of an interesting idea. I'll kind of base it off of that like I just did. I kind of based off the pixels it turned into, and now I have that kind of same face. Now, if I want to give her more of an angry face here, like she's making an angry face, all I have to do is erase eyebrows here. And I'm going to just go with just straight lines now, just coming straight up like this. And this is going to be readable from far away. And sometimes you might, have over here your navigation. If you actually have a navigation option here, and then you can make that as, you can expand this out, and I guess I can pull it out here. But you can pull this out and you can even, if you have two screens like I do, you can pull out another screen, and then you can well, anyway, in this case, even put on my other screen isn't really going to be big enough, and I have a pretty big screen to really see that, because that's how big the head is on this whole big piece of paper. So it's really, really tiny. If it was printed out, in this case, this will only be viewable online. This is the online, size. If this were printed out, you wouldn't be able to see anything. This is more the printout saying it wouldn't have no detail at all. So you got really to be careful. But you can see adding those lines there work really good. And then maybe for the mouth, I might want to change the shape. And there's a bunch of different shapes you can use for different expressions, for a smile, especially if it's like a big smile, you might just stick to that very basic expression like this here. And that right there's enough. And that's kind of, now she kind of looks like she has this kind of wicked look on her face because her eyebrows are mean and her, her face is happy. If I change the eyebrows, you can see the whole entire face expression is going to change here. Let's go ahead and make sure we still have the hair in here. Now I'm just going to add, high eyebrows. Now you can see she looks happy, but you can start to see that we start to lose some of that when we add too much. So we want to be careful not to add too much detail. Make sure there's enough white space between everything that we're drawing. If not, then it's likely that we won't be able to tell what it looks like. And there you have it. Even that, that hairline there is kind of like, almost looks like the eyes being broken in half. And you can, change that by just erasing the hairline altogether, around the eyeball at least. Break up that line like so. And now you have a face that's more readable. So just keep that in mind. When you're drawing faces that are small, you can use these different techniques I've talked about and then see how much you can get away with. Make sure that if you're printing it out, to print it out first before you spend too much time drawing an entire page. You want to make sure that the details are working. Right, so that's it for this lesson. That's how to draw small faces when you're dealing with people way in the background or a panel that just doesn't allow you to have that face in there. And there's times where sometimes it's good to just have no face at all. And like I did in my comic, and it's fine. All right, thank you for watching. Now prepare for the exercise.